what they need to do. And this, for me, in running in this election, is showing them what they can do. I'm proud of my past. I grew up in Cornwallis, what we called at that time Cornwallis Projects. That's where I cut my teeth, But I tell folks, even though I grew up in the projects didn't grow up in me. And I think it is incumbent upon all of us to be able to reach back and pull someone up with us. And as our young men and women begin to see us move forward and make strides, they can understand that, hey, I don't have to be on the corner selling drugs. I don't have to be out there robbing someone. I don't have to be there just licking my wounds. I can get up and I can do something with my life, and I can make sure that what God has placed in me and what God has given me, I can share with somebody else. And the best way to do that is to be the example and not just talk about an example.
Yeah, that's very much true. And you're right. A lot of times we just have people that are just talking about the example, and they're not necessarily being the example. And I know that one of the things, I was just wondering, here in Durham, and I'm sure it's up there even in the Northeast and probably in Minnesota, a lot of times we depend too much, and I alluded to this in the introduction when me and Gene were talking before we all you guests on and everything. We depend on the PACs and the PA and the different committees that are out there, and we depend too much on the organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, and things of that nature. And I know that those organizations have an importance, but I was wondering, as a candidate, how do you get folks to get past whatever their endorsement was? Because 9 times out of 10, those endorsements are not going to be for the Republican candidate, and actually get you, or actually get folks to consider you as a viable candidate and somebody that will represent them well in office and actually think about giving you a vote. Because I know a lot of times people will automatically, if you don't get those endorsements, they'll just be like, well, I'm not going to vote for you because you didn't have that backing.
Exactly. And I think that's where, again, not only the church, but anyone, even like this podcast, we have to begin to help our community and everyone to understand, not just black, but white, brown, red, whatever color, to understand that it is important and it is incumbent upon us to read for ourselves. One of the things I used to hate, Mark, I used to hear when I was growing up, if you ever wanted to hide something from a black man, put it in a book. I used to hate, and I still hate hearing that, but we have to teach our children, we have to teach our folk how to read for themselves, and not just read a card that someone hands you, but know what that person stands for. Dr. Livonia Allison, and I hope I quote her correctly, had this saying that just because you're my kin don't make, just because you're my skin don't make you my kin. And I think it's important for us to understand that we have to find people that are going to fight for us. I didn't get, the endorsements from the committee. I didn't get endorsements from the People's Alliance, and that's okay. But what it has allowed me to do was it has placed me in places to speak where I ordinarily may not have been, and to say some things that I ordinarily would not have said. And that is that we have to fight for our folk. We have to fight for what's right. And doing what's right is not always popular. Doing what's right is not what everybody always wants. I look at Dr. King, and God knows, I'm sure that man has cried. And when you read the books and the stories of him, the things that he went through, not from the other side, but from some other ministers, from some people of his own faith, but to do what was right because they wanted him to be a certain way. They wanted him to act a certain way, to do something, just like everything else. But it's a price to stand for what's right. It's a price to stand up and say, hey, no, this is not right. This is not good for me. It's not good for my community. It's not good for my family. And so I have to fight to make sure that young African Americans, that my children have the same opportunities across the board, and that we can all grow together. And Mark, stop me because I'm a preacher. I'll keep going now. But
no problem. Just real quickly, I was going to add to that and everything because I know you get in your preacher mode and everything. But it actually brings up an interesting point and everything because I was actually thinking about the fact that we had not that long ago, just last week, we had Pierce Freelon, and we know that he ran for mayor. And one of the things that became an issue, and we've had some of the other political candidates on, like Jillian and our current mayor, Steve Shaw, but I know one of the issues that people would bring up was the fact of him being a youth, and being fairly young in age and everything in terms of the political circuit, and not having necessarily the experience because he came out of the hip-hop world. I mean, Pierce Freelon is a well-known, I would argue, he's definitely regional, and some people maybe even on the national level have heard of Pierce Freelon and some of the different projects that he's been involved in. And I'm thinking that even, and correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, but I'm thinking even you, because I think you said that you're in your 30s, you probably get folks that are probably trying to discourage you from some of your activism, because I know that's one of the things that people got with Pierce. He ran for mayor, and folks were like, you have not had the experience. You have not held the office. So why can you hold this office when you haven't when you have had no experience in politics? But he's done a lot of, like you just talked about, whether it was with Baba Chuck or whether it was with other people, he's done a lot of other things in the community that were activist type things that were going on. So I was wondering, I want to hear from both of you, but I'll start with Larissa, if you have ever done anything in the political realm, and did you run into some of these same things that Dr. Birch is running into? He's running all the Republican side.
I run into this all the time. Oh, you're just a rapper. What do you know? You're just a percussionist. What do you know? And I go, some people have no idea of our stories. I don't look as obviously experience is wisdom, but at the same time, that doesn't mean just because you haven't been on this earth as long as others that you don't have experience. I was born to my mother, who was the first Latina appointed by the governor of Minnesota in 1985 for the for offices of equal opportunity and equity. And so right now, I'm sorry, I'm having a bad connection. Right now, I was brought up in the Capitol where we had to fight to get there, and we're still fighting to get there. I'm a part of the Wilder Foundation's Community Equity Pipeline to change policies and legislation. So, you got to be careful how you just assume certain things when you're walking into rooms. It's a stereotype, right? We run into the stereotypes of even within our own circles as people of color, and we gotta lead by example, and we also gotta continue to, when somebody knocks you down, I always quote Hove, I always quote Jay-Z, brush that hate off your shoulders, keep it moving. Our ancestors went through so much. They survived through how our actions are now. And so when we go into these political circles, I don't look at my music being any different than Mayor Carter, Melvin Carter here in St. Paul, trying to push $15 minimum wage. We're all working hands in hand. I'm just happen to be someone who's not on the ballot. They may want to get me on there, but I'm still focusing on the babies, on the children, and making them know that they one day can be on a ballot if that's what they want to do.
And it's actually interesting you bring that up, because both of you actually mentioned this, and I want you to share a little bit of this, and I want to bring back Dr. Birch as well. But you mentioned the importance of, as I understand it, the new CD that you have out, Maria, is actually dedicated to your mom and other women in politics. So explain to me how that came about and everything, and why you're doing this, because at this time, like I said earlier, and she is running as a Democrat, but Stacey Abrams is running in Georgia, and there are others that are running on both sides of the platform.
Ocasio,
I was just wondering how you got involved in. Go ahead.
I said Ocasio, New York, is a Boricua. Ilhan Omar is the first, Muslim woman who's looking to be elected. You know what I'm saying? These are our circles. We run together. You know what I'm saying? Where we may even not be in the same state. They're listening to my music, and I'm encouraging them to run. So the influence of this album that's dropping is dedicated to not even just women in politics, women who have been oppressed, women of color, indigenous women who have survived sterilization, who have survived genocide and rape, and to ensure that the baby girls that are in class right now that may not have a teacher that look like them or come from where they come from, like I did being in Minnesota, it's to show that you are a gem, you are a jewel, and you come from the kings and queens of where your tribe is from. And so the album is hip-hop, it's activism, because hip-hop is activism, right? I think about Bubba Chuck when I was 10 years old, and he came to Minnesota, and I took his drum workshop, and I said, your drum looks different than mine, but it sounds very similar. And he says, because it comes from the same parents. you know, and with that, it just, you know, you look at somebody and you're like, man, that's my grandfather in that man. You know, you feel a connection. So with the album that I'm dropping out tomorrow, which is Election Day, it's to show that tomorrow's going to be a successful day. You know, we got to see it. We got to feel it. We got to believe it. Those are the words my mother and my grandmother told me. If you can't see it, if you can't believe it, if you can't smell what's cooking in the kitchen, how do you expect to feed the people the greatness? So that's what we're doing. That's what I do. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling on and I'm trying to get as much information, but I'm actually in these streets right now making sure people vote for our women of color. They're kind of looking at me like, Issa, wrap it up. You got to go on stage. So.
No, you're actually doing wonderful, and I know you've got to get on stage, so I do appreciate you being on the call with us and things. So definitely appreciate you being here with us, and you definitely shared a great lot of jewels and wisdom and things of that nature. And I'm sure that Dr. Birch can understand even the role of women and how they were very important, because like you said, he grew up in the projects of Durham, but there are a lot of women that are very much a key part of even what the African American Dance Ensemble is now. As a matter of fact, the lady that is interim director is actually a sister, and she's stepping in some very big footsteps, in my opinion. But if anybody can do it, from what I've read about it seems like she can do it. And there are definitely a lot of women like Mama Tony, Mama Sadia, and others that have been connected with the organization that are very much about the empowerment of women. So they can definitely relate to the message that you're putting out there. And I know that you're going to rock the performance that you're doing, so I'm going to let you hit the stage and do your thing. But I'm very glad that you were able to join us on this show and share with us what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me be a part of this, and thank you to the other guests for your words. And, you know, let's try to recognize how strong our movements are when they're together, and let's also try and help and recognize that leadership has to be given to the next generation. And my goal is to be able to, those children recognize it ain't about Maria Issa, it ain't about, you know, the people who are putting themselves in a platform like myself through art or politics and education and health. It's about them recognizing that they have the opportunity to do so, and they got to do it better and bigger, and we're here to protect them.
No doubt about it.
No doubt.
Thank you, brothers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria.
Dr. Birch, what did you have to think about that? Because I know that a lot of what you have done, both in the ministerial work as well as in politics, is about trying to reach out to those people that are, like she's mentioned, the youth, but also reaching out to women and getting them involved. And I know even some of what you've talked about with some of the issues that you're concerned about are issues that the women of the world will be concerned about as well.
Yes, you know, and then that just brings open a whole other thing for me, because I always look back at my mom. And my mom became, she was a pastor back in the early 60s. She was, I guess I could say she was a female pastor when female pastors wasn't cool. And I got to see, even as a young boy, how she had to deal with men that did not believe in women preachers. I often marveled at my mom, and I still do. You know, and God rest her soul, but I still marvel at how she was able to raise 9 children on a shoestring budget, and then sometimes she didn't have a string. But to see how she carried herself always in her messages, a most powerful preacher, to teach us values, to love us. And I think that because of her dedication to her family, because of her love for God and for us, we are where we are today. You know, I thank God that I had my mom, you know, didn't have that 2-parent home that so many people like to talk about. But as long as you have a loving parent, as long as you have someone who loves you and someone who will nourish you, and yes, sometimes it's as only women can, you give God glory and you give God thanks. I think we do ourselves a disservice and an injustice when we forget that the strength of the church is often built upon women. For many of our churches that are today, if you take the women out, I have to keep account for